The morning sun cast long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Command facility in Coronado, California. Lieutenant Sarah Chin stepped out of her rental car, adjusting the straps of her tactical gear bag. At 28, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every stripe on her uniform through blood, sweat, and determination. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dark eyes surveyed the sprawling complex with the analytical precision that had made her one of the Navy's top intelligence analysts. Sarah had received the call 3 days earlier while stationed at the Pentagon. The voice on the other end belonged to Commander Jake Morrison, a man whose reputation preceded him throughout the special operations community. SEAL Team 6 needed an intelligence specialist for a classified mission, and her name had risen to the top of a very short list. What Morrison hadn't mentioned, and what Sarah was about to discover, was that she would be the first female intelligence officer to embed directly with an active SEAL team during a high-risk operation. The base was already buzzing with activity despite the early hour. Sarah watched as teams of operators moved with purposeful efficiency across the compound. These men were legends in their own right, each one a product of the most grueling military training program in the world. The thought of working alongside them should have been intimidating, but Sarah felt only the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with a new challenge. Commander Morrison's office was located in a nondescript building near the center of the compound. Sarah knocked twice and entered when she heard the gruff, "Come in," from within. Morrison was exactly what she had expected, a weathered man in his early 40s with piercing blue eyes and graying temples. His desk was covered with classified folders and satellite imagery, the tools of a man who dealt in life and death decisions on a daily basis. "Lieutenant Chun," Morrison said, rising from his chair. "Welcome to Team 6. I trust your flight from Washington was comfortable." "Yes, sir. Thank you for selecting me for this assignment." Sarah's voice was steady, professional. She had learned long ago not to show uncertainty, especially in rooms filled with men who were looking for any sign of weakness. Morrison gestured for her to sit. "Before we begin, I want to make something clear. This team has been operating together for 2 years. They're tight-knit, they're effective, and they don't particularly like change. The fact that you're a woman is going to ruffle some feathers, but that's not why you're here. You're here because you're the best intelligence analyst the Navy has to offer, and we need the best for what we're about to undertake." Sarah nodded, appreciating his directness. She had faced skepticism before and had learned to let her work speak for itself. "I understand, sir. What can you tell me about the mission?" Morrison opened one of the folders on his desk and slid a photograph across to her. The image showed a compound nestled in mountainous terrain, surrounded by high walls and guard towers. "This is a terrorist training facility in the mountains of Afghanistan. Our intelligence suggests that Khalid al-Rashid, one of the most wanted men on the planet, will be visiting this location within the next 72 hours. Sarah studied the photograph with practiced eyes. Al-Rashid was responsible for dozens of attacks across 3 continents, and his capture had been a priority for multiple government agencies for over 5 years. "What makes us think he'll be there?" "Intercepted communications, movement of known associates, and pattern analysis from our Afghan assets. The window is small, but the intelligence is solid." Morrison's expression grew grave. "The problem is the location. It's in a valley surrounded by mountains, accessible only by foot or helicopter. The terrain is treacherous, and the compound is heavily fortified. A traditional assault would be suicide. So what's the plan?" Morrison smiled for the first time since she had entered his office. "That's where you come in. We need someone who can analyze the target in real time, adapt to changing intelligence, and provide tactical recommendations during the operation. The team will insert via halo jump at night, approach on foot, and conduct surveillance until al-Rashid arrives. Once we have positive identification, we extract him alive if possible." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Halo jumps, high-altitude, low-opening parachute insertions, were dangerous even for experienced operators. The thought of making her first jump with a SEAL team into hostile territory was both terrifying and exhilarating. "When do I meet the team?" "Right now." Morrison stood and headed for the door. "Fair warning, Lieutenant. These men have been through hell together. They've saved each other's lives more times than they can count. You're going to have to prove yourself, and you're going to have to do it quickly." They walked across the compound to a training facility where the sound of gunfire echoed from within. Morrison led her through a maze of corridors to an observation deck overlooking an indoor shooting range. Below them, 6 men moved through a complex tactical scenario with fluid precision. Sarah watched in fascination as they communicated through hand signals and coordinated their movements with an efficiency that bordered on telepathic. "That's Bravo team," Morrison said. "Your new family for the next few weeks." Sarah studied each man as Morrison provided brief introductions. Master Chief Petty Officer Tony Diesel Rodriguez was the team leader, a compact man with arms like tree trunks and a reputation for never leaving a man behind. Petty Officer First Class Mike "Ghost" Patterson was their sniper, a tall, lean Texan who could put a bullet through a quarter at 800 meters. Senior Chief Danny "Doc" Williams served as their medic, but his skills extended far beyond battlefield medicine. He held a master's degree in biochemistry and spoke 4 languages fluently. The youngest member of the team was Petty Officer Second Class Jason "Rookie" Thompson, though at 25 and with 3 combat deployments under his belt, he was hardly inexperienced. Petty Officer First Class Marcus "Tank" Johnson was their explosives expert, a former college football player whose gentle demeanor off the battlefield contrasted sharply with his effectiveness on it. Finally, there was Senior Chief Rick "Sage" Martinez, the team's communications specialist and second-in-command, a quiet man whose calm presence seemed to anchor the entire group. "They look impressive," Sarah observed, watching as the team cleared the final room of the training scenario with textbook precision. "They're the best," Morrison replied. "But they're also set in their ways." The integration of a new team member, especially one who's never served with special operations, is going to be challenging for everyone involved. As if on cue, the training exercise concluded, and the 6 men began making their way up to the observation deck. Sarah straightened her posture and prepared for what she knew would be a crucial first impression. The door opened, and Master Chief Rodriguez entered first, his dark eyes immediately focusing on her with an intensity that made her want to step backward. "Master Chief, I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Sarah Chun," Morrison said. "She'll be your intelligence specialist for the upcoming operation." Rodriguez extended his hand, and Sarah was surprised by the gentleness of his grip despite his obvious strength. "Welcome to the team, Lieutenant. I hope you're ready for some real work." The introductions continued as each team member filed into the room. Sarah noticed the subtle signs of evaluation in their expressions, the way Ghost's eyes seemed to catalog every detail of her appearance, how Doc's medical training led him to assess her physical condition, the slight skepticism in Tank's polite smile. They were professionals, but they were also human beings who had learned to trust their instincts about people in life-or-death situations. "So, Lieutenant," Sage said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Sarah couldn't quite place, "what makes you think you can keep up with us old-timers?" Sarah had been expecting this question. "I don't think I can keep up with you, Senior Chief. I know I can. I've completed the same physical fitness requirements as any special operations candidate. I'm qualified on the same weapons systems you use, and I've spent the last 6 years analyzing terrorist networks and predicting their behavior. What I lack in field experience, I make up for in preparation and determination." The room fell silent for a moment before Ghost let out a low whistle. "She's got some backbone, I'll give her that." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Backbone is good, but this isn't an academic exercise, Lieutenant. When bullets start flying and everything goes to hell, backbone won't keep you alive. Training will, experience will, and trusting your team will." "I understand that, Master Chief. That's why I'm here early. I want to train with you, learn your procedures, and prove that I belong on this team before we step foot on that helicopter." Morrison clapped his hands together. "Excellent. You have 48 hours to integrate Lieutenant Chun into your team protocols. The mission brief is tomorrow at 0800, and we deploy the following morning. Any questions?" There were none, though Sarah could feel the weight of unspoken concerns in the room. As Morrison left, she found herself alone with 6 of the most elite soldiers in the world, all of whom were undoubtedly questioning whether she would be an asset or a liability in the field. Rodriguez broke the silence first. "All right, Lieutenant. If you want to be part of this team, you're going to have to earn it. We start with physical training in 30 minutes. I suggest you get changed and meet us at the obstacle course." The next 2 hours were among the most physically demanding of Sarah's life. The SEAL obstacle course was designed to push operators to their absolute limits, and the team didn't make any accommodations for her presence. She struggled through rope climbs that left her hands raw and bleeding, conquered wall traverses that tested every muscle in her core, and completed sprint intervals that had her lungs burning and her legs shaking. Through it all, the team watched and evaluated. They didn't offer encouragement, but they also didn't hold back criticism when she made mistakes. When she faltered on a rope climb halfway through, Tank simply said, "Try again." When she stumbled during bear crawls under barbed wire, Ghost pointed out that in the field, that stumble could mean the difference between life and death. But Sarah persevered. Every time she fell, she got back up. Every time she failed an exercise, she attempted it again until she succeeded. By the end of the session, she was covered in mud and sweat. Her uniform was torn in several places, and she could barely stand. But she had completed every challenge they had thrown at her. "Not bad for a Pentagon analyst," Rookie said with what might have been the beginning of respect. "Not bad for anyone," Doc corrected, offering Sarah a bottle of water. "I've seen plenty of seasoned operators struggle with that course." Rodriguez approached her as she tried to catch her breath. "You've got heart, Lieutenant. That's clear. But heart alone won't be enough where we're going. Tomorrow we start weapons training and tactical exercises. The real test will be whether you can think clearly and make smart decisions when you're exhausted, scared, and under pressure." Sarah nodded, too winded to speak, but determined to meet whatever challenges they would present. As the team dispersed to shower and eat, she remained on the course for a few extra minutes, studying the obstacles she had just conquered. Each one represented not just a physical challenge, but a metaphor for the barriers she would have to overcome to earn acceptance from these men. That evening, Sarah sat in her temporary quarters reviewing intelligence files about Al-Rashid and his network. The man was a ghost, appearing only when he chose to be seen and disappearing again before authorities could react. His training camps had produced some of the most dangerous terrorists of the past decade, and his capture would undoubtedly save countless innocent lives. A knock at her door interrupted her study. She opened it to find Sage standing in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I come in? Thought you might want to go over some of the technical specs for tomorrow's training." Sarah stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. Sage handed her one of the cups and settled into the room's single chair while she remained standing by her desk. The coffee was stronger than she preferred, but she appreciated the gesture. "The team's talking about you," Sage said without preamble. "They're impressed with your performance today, but they're also worried." "About what?" "About whether you understand what you're getting into. This isn't a training exercise or a simulation. People are going to be trying to kill us, and one mistake by any team member could get everyone killed. It's not personal, but the stakes are too high for sentiment." Sarah set down her coffee cup and met his gaze directly. "I know exactly what I'm getting into, Senior Chief. I've studied Al-Rashid for 3 years. I know his tactics, his psychology, and his weaknesses. I also know that intelligence gathered from a distance is never as accurate as intelligence gathered on the ground. That's why I'm here." Sage nodded slowly. "Rodriguez asked me to feel you out, see if you're having second thoughts. I can tell him you're committed, but I need to know something else. Why did you volunteer for this assignment? You could have stayed safely behind a desk in Washington and provided remote intelligence support. Why put yourself in harm's way?" Sarah had been asking herself the same question since accepting the assignment. The honest answer was complicated, involving her desire to prove herself in a male-dominated field, her belief that she could make a real difference in the fight against terrorism, and her need to test her own limits. But she gave Sage the simple version. Because the best intelligence comes from being as close to the action as possible, and because Al-Rashid has killed too many innocent people to be allowed to continue operating. Sage finished his coffee and stood to leave. "Fair enough. One piece of advice, don't try to prove yourself tomorrow. Just be yourself, and let your skills speak for themselves. The team will respect competence, but they'll distrust bravado." After he left, Sarah returned to her intelligence files, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation. She realized that she was already beginning to think of herself as part of the team, despite having known these men for less than 12 hours. There was something about their professionalism and dedication that commanded respect, and she found herself wanting to live up to their standards. The morning of her second day began before dawn with weapons training. The team introduced her to the full arsenal they would be carrying on the mission: assault rifles, sidearms, explosives, and specialized equipment she had only read about in technical manuals. Each weapon had its own characteristics and quirks, and the team members shared their knowledge with the patience of experienced instructors. Sarah discovered that her marksmanship scores from the Naval Academy had not prepared her for the reality of combat shooting. Target practice on a calm firing range was completely different from engaging multiple moving targets while under stress and physical duress. Ghost worked with her patiently, adjusting her stance and breathing techniques until her accuracy began to improve. The key, he explained while they waited for their targets to be reset, is not to overthink it. Trust your training, control your breathing, and squeeze the trigger smoothly. In combat, you won't have time for conscious thought. The tactical exercises that followed were even more challenging. The team ran through dozens of scenarios, building clearances, hostage rescues, ambush responses, and extraction procedures. Sarah's role was to provide real-time intelligence analysis while maintaining situational awareness and contributing to the team's combat effectiveness. During one particularly complex simulation, the team was tasked with clearing a building while she provided overwatch and intelligence updates via radio. Sarah found herself lying prone on a rooftop, scanning the surrounding area through binoculars while simultaneously monitoring radio traffic and updating tactical maps on her tablet. "Falcon, this is Bravo 1. Rodriguez's voice crackled through her earpiece. "What's the status on our 6 o'clock? Sarah quickly scanned the rear approach to the building before responding. "Bravo 1 Falcon. Your 6 is clear, but I'm seeing movement in the building across the street, 2nd floor, 3rd window from the right." "Copy that, Falcon. Keep eyes on that window." The exercise continued for another 20 minutes, with Sarah providing constant updates on enemy positions, civilian locations, and potential escape routes. By the time it concluded, she realized that the team had begun referring to her by a call sign, Falcon, though she had no idea how or when that designation had been chosen. "Why Falcon?" she asked Rodriguez during their post-exercise debriefing. The Master Chief smiled, the first genuine expression of warmth she had seen from him. "Doc came up with it. Said watching you work reminded him of a falcon hunting. Patient, focused, and deadly accurate when you strike. Plus, you've got those sharp eyes that don't miss anything." Sarah felt a surge of pride at the comparison. Falcons were predators, hunters who combined intelligence with lethal precision. If that was how the team saw her, she was making progress toward earning their respect. The remainder of the day was spent in briefings and equipment preparation. Sarah learned about the specific challenges of the target location, studied satellite imagery until she could navigate the compound blindfolded, and memorized the faces and profiles of every known associate of al-Rashid. The intelligence picture was complex, with multiple variables that could change at any moment. That evening, the team gathered for a final planning session. The mood was serious, but not tense. These men had done this type of operation dozens of times before, and their confidence was infectious. Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time since arriving at the base, feeling more like a member of the team and less like an outsider looking in. "Tomorrow morning we fly to Afghanistan," Rodriguez announced. "From there, we'll have 24 hours to establish our forward operating base and conduct final reconnaissance. Intelligence suggests al-Rashid will arrive at the target location within 48 hours of our insertion." Sarah studied the faces around the table, noting the subtle signs of pre-mission focus. These men were already mentally preparing for combat, running through contingencies, and visualizing successful outcomes. She tried to adopt the same mindset, pushing aside her nervousness and focusing on the technical aspects of the mission. "Any final questions?" Rodriguez asked. Sarah raised her hand. "What happens if the intelligence is wrong? If al-Rashid doesn't show? Or if the situation on the ground doesn't match our expectations?" "Then, we adapt," Sage answered simply. "That's why we have you with us, Falcon. Your job is to help us make sense of whatever we encounter and adjust our tactics accordingly." The meeting broke up shortly afterward, and Sarah spent her final evening in California reviewing her personal equipment and writing letters to her family. She didn't mention the specific nature of her assignment, but she wanted them to know how much they meant to her in case something went wrong. As she prepared for bed, Sarah reflected on how much had changed in just 2 days. She had arrived as an unknown quantity, a Pentagon analyst whose field experience consisted of training exercises and simulations. Now she was Falcon, a trusted member of one of the world's most elite military units, preparing to hunt one of America's most wanted enemies. The transformation hadn't been easy. Every muscle in her body ached from the physical training, her hands were covered in calluses from weapons practice, and her mind was overwhelmed with tactical procedures and intelligence data. But she had proven to herself and to the team that she belonged here. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, greater dangers, and the ultimate test of everything she had learned. But tonight, for the first time since accepting this assignment, Sarah Chun felt ready for whatever lay ahead. She was no longer just an intelligence analyst. She was Falcon, and she was going to war. The C-130 transport aircraft rumbled through the night sky over Afghanistan, its cargo hold filled with the controlled tension that always preceded a high-risk operation. Sarah sat strapped into her seat, watching the 6 members of Bravo team as they performed their final equipment checks with methodical precision. The red interior lighting cast strange shadows across their faces, making them look like warriors from some ancient mythology. The past 18 hours had been a whirlwind of preparation and travel. They had departed from Coronado before dawn, made a brief stop at a classified location in Germany for refueling and final intelligence updates, and were now approaching their insertion point in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Sarah's stomach churned from a combination of turbulence, altitude, and the pre-mission adrenaline that seemed to affect everyone differently. Master Chief Rodriguez moved through the cargo hold, checking each team member's gear one final time. When he reached Sarah, he paused to examine her parachute harness with particular care. The halo jump would be her first real test under operational conditions, and everyone knew it. "Remember what we practiced," Rodriguez said, his voice barely audible over the aircraft engines. "Exit clean, maintain altitude awareness, and don't deploy your chute until you see the rest of us pull our cords. Ghost will be jumping right behind you to provide guidance." Sarah nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. The training jumps back at Coronado had gone well, but jumping into enemy territory in complete darkness was an entirely different proposition. One mistake during the descent could scatter the team across miles of mountainous terrain, compromising the entire mission before it began. The aircraft's crew chief appeared from the cockpit and held up 10 fingers, then made a circular motion with his hand. 10 minutes to the drop zone. Around her, the team members began their final preparations with the fluid efficiency of men who had performed these rituals dozens of times. Weapons were secured, night vision goggles were tested, and communication equipment received final checks. Sarah ran through her own mental checklist while watching the team prepare. Her primary responsibility was intelligence gathering and analysis, but she also carried a full combat load, including an M4 carbine, sidearm, and enough ammunition for a sustained firefight. The weight of the equipment was substantial, but she had trained extensively to operate under similar loads. 5 minutes, the crew chief announced. The team stood and moved toward the rear of the aircraft, where the massive cargo ramp was already beginning to lower. The sound of rushing wind filled the hold as the night sky became visible beyond the ramp. Sarah could see nothing but darkness below, no lights, no landmarks, just the black void of mountainous terrain that they would soon be falling through at terminal velocity. Rodriguez connected to the aircraft's communication system for final confirmation with the cockpit. "Control, Bravo 1. Team ready for insertion. Bravo 1, Control. You are cleared for drop. Wind is calm, visibility unlimited, drop zone is secure. Good hunting." The crew chief held up one finger, then pointed toward the open ramp. Sarah fell into line behind Ghost, her heart hammering against her ribs. Below them was approximately 2 miles of empty air, followed by some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth, occupied by people who would kill them without hesitation if given the chance. "Remember," Ghost said over the wind noise, "I'll be right behind you. If anything goes wrong, follow my lead, and we'll sort it out on the ground." Before Sarah could respond, Rodriguez gave the signal and stepped off the ramp into the darkness. One by one, the team members followed him into the void. When her turn came, Sarah didn't allow herself to hesitate. She took 3 quick steps and jumped. The sensation of free fall was unlike anything she had experienced during training. The aircraft disappeared above her almost immediately, leaving her alone in the vast darkness with only the whistle of wind and the knowledge that somewhere in the black space around her, 5 other human beings were falling at the same rate. Her altimeter glowed softly on her wrist, marking their descent through the thin mountain air. At exactly 4,000 feet, Sarah saw the first parachute deploy ahead of her, a dark shape that suddenly blossomed against the stars. She pulled her own ripcord and felt the familiar sharp jerk as her chute caught the air and slowed her descent to a manageable rate. Looking around, she could see the other team members' parachutes scattered across the sky like dark flowers. The landing came faster than expected. Sarah hit the rocky ground harder than she would have preferred, rolling as she had been trained to absorb the impact. For a moment she lay still, conducting a mental inventory of her body parts and listening for any signs of enemy activity. The silence was profound. No voices, no mechanical sounds, just the wind moving through the mountain passes. Falcon, Bravo 1. Sound off. Rodriguez's voice was barely a whisper through her earpiece. Falcon up, she responded quietly. One by one, the other team members checked in. Everyone had landed safely within a few hundred meters of the planned drop zone. Sarah gathered her parachute and buried it under a pile of rocks as they had practiced, then began moving toward the predetermined rally point using her night vision goggles to navigate the treacherous terrain. The team reassembled within 20 minutes of landing, emerging from the darkness like ghosts materializing from another dimension. Rodriguez conducted a quick head count and equipment check before moving them toward their first objective, a concealed observation post that would serve as their base of operations for the next phase of the mission. The hike to their observation post took 4 hours through some of the most challenging terrain Sarah had ever encountered. The mountains of Afghanistan were brutal under the best circumstances, but moving through them at night while carrying full combat loads tested every aspect of their physical conditioning. The team moved in single file with Sage leading as point man, navigating by GPS and terrain recognition while Sarah and the others followed in his footsteps. They encountered no signs of enemy activity during the movement, but Sarah remained constantly alert for any indication that their presence had been detected. Her job was to monitor radio frequencies, analyze any intelligence that came in through their satellite communication link, and maintain awareness of the tactical situation. Every few hundred meters, she would stop to scan their back trail with binoculars and check for any signs of pursuit. The observation post was located on a ridge overlooking the valley that contained their target. Previous reconnaissance teams had constructed a well-camouflaged position that provided excellent visibility of the terrorist compound while remaining invisible to anyone in the valley below. As they approached the position, Sarah could see why it had been selected. The view of the target was nearly perfect, allowing them to observe every building and approach route. Rodriguez assigned watch schedules and established their communication procedures while the rest of the team settled into defensive positions around the observation post. Sarah set up her intelligence workstation in the center of the position, arranging her laptop computer, satellite communication equipment, and analytical tools in a configuration that would allow her to monitor multiple information sources simultaneously. Falcon, what's your assessment of the target area? Rodriguez asked once everyone was in position. Sarah studied the compound through high-powered binoculars, comparing what she observed with the satellite imagery and architectural plans they had studied during mission planning. The compound matches our intelligence exactly, Master Chief. I count 12 buildings arranged around a central courtyard, with guard towers at each corner, and what appears to be a motor pool on the eastern side. I'm seeing minimal activity, maybe 6 to 8 personnel visible, mostly concentrated around the main building. Any changes to the defensive positions? Negative. Guard positions are exactly where we expected them to be. The approach routes we identified during planning appear viable, and I don't see any new obstacles or fortifications. Rodriguez nodded and moved to establish communication with their headquarters. Sarah continued her detailed analysis of the compound, noting patterns of movement, shift changes, and any other details that might prove useful when the time came to execute their assault. The waiting had begun, and it would test their patience as much as their skills. The first day of observation passed without incident. Sarah maintained constant surveillance of the compound while monitoring intelligence updates from multiple sources. The team rotated through watches, with 2 people always maintaining eyes on the target while the others rested or conducted equipment maintenance. The routine was designed to prevent fatigue and ensure that they remained alert for any signs of al-Rashid's arrival. During her off-duty periods, Sarah found herself studying the other team members and observing how they operated in the field. Each man brought unique skills and perspectives to the team, and she began to understand how they functioned as a cohesive unit. Rodriguez provided steady leadership without micromanaging, trusting each team member to fulfill his responsibilities. Ghost's sniper skills were legendary, but Sarah was impressed by his knowledge of tactics and his ability to analyze enemy behavior. Doc's medical training was obvious, but his linguistic abilities and cultural knowledge proved equally valuable in interpreting what they observed. Tank's expertise with explosives was matched by his understanding of structural engineering, allowing him to identify weak points in the compound's defenses. Rookie's youth and energy were balanced by solid tactical knowledge and an eagerness to learn from his more experienced teammates. Sage's communication skills kept them connected to the outside world, while his calm presence helped maintain team cohesion during long hours of waiting. On the second day, their patience was rewarded. Sarah was conducting her morning surveillance routine when she noticed increased activity in the compound's motor pool. Several vehicles had arrived during the night, and armed men were establishing additional security positions around the perimeter. Bravo 1 Falcon. I'm seeing significant changes in the target's security posture. New vehicles in the motor pool, additional personnel, and what appears to be preparation for a VIP arrival. Rodriguez moved to her position and studied the compound through his own binoculars. How many additional personnel? I count at least 15 new faces, all armed and in tactical positions. Based on their equipment and movement patterns, these guys are better trained than the regular compound security. Rodriguez contacted headquarters while Sarah continued her analysis. Within an hour, they received confirmation that multiple intelligence sources indicated al-Rashid's imminent arrival. The moment they had been waiting for was approaching, and the team began their final preparations for the assault. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would wait until al-Rashid was confirmed to be inside the compound, then approach under cover of darkness and establish positions around the perimeter. Once in position, they would create diversions to draw the guards' attention away from their primary objective, while a smaller element infiltrated the main building to locate and capture their target. Sarah's role during the assault would be critical. She would remain at the observation post to provide overwatch and real-time intelligence updates to the assault team. Her elevated position would allow her to monitor the entire compound and provide early warning of any threats or complications that developed during the operation. As evening approached, the compound's activity level increased dramatically. Sarah watched through her binoculars as additional vehicles arrived and security patrols were reinforced. The preparations were clearly for someone important, and every indication suggested that their target would arrive within hours. Falcon, Bravo 1. What's your read on the defensive positions? Rodriguez asked as the team prepared to move. They've doubled the guard force and established overlapping fields of fire around the main building. The roof positions have been reinforced, and I'm seeing heavy weapons emplacements that weren't there yesterday. They're taking this visit very seriously. Any weak points you can identify? Sarah studied the compound carefully, looking for gaps in the defensive coverage that the team could exploit. The eastern approach still looks viable. There's a blind spot between the motor pool and the main building where the guards can't see each other. If you can neutralize the rooftop observers, that would give you a clean approach to the target building. Rodriguez nodded and gathered the team for final mission briefing. The plan was refined based on Sarah's observations, with specific assignments given to each team member. Ghost would eliminate the rooftop sentries with precision shots from a concealed position. Tank would create a diversion on the western side of the compound to draw attention away from the main assault. The remaining team members would infiltrate the main building while Sarah provided overwatch and intelligence support from her elevated position. Remember, we need Al-Rashid alive if possible, Rodriguez emphasized. But the mission's success and team safety take priority over everything else. If the situation deteriorates, we extract immediately. The team moved out just after sunset, disappearing into the darkness like shadows. Sarah watched them through her night vision equipment until they vanished completely, then settled into her position for what would be the longest few hours of her military career. From her vantage point, she could see the entire valley and most of the surrounding mountains, but the responsibility of guiding the team through their assault felt overwhelming. 2 hours after the team departed, Sarah observed a convoy of vehicles approaching the compound from the south. 3 black SUVs with heavy escort moved through the valley and entered the compound's main gate. Even at a distance of nearly 2 kilometers, she could see the increased activity as compound personnel scrambled to accommodate their important visitor. Bravo 1 Falcon. Convoy has arrived at the compound. 3 vehicles, heavy security presence. This looks like our guy. Copy that, Falcon. We're in position and ready to execute. Stand by for status updates. Sarah watched the compound through her spotting scope, tracking the movement of personnel and vehicles as the new arrivals settled in. The main building showed increased activity, with lights visible in previously dark windows and guards posted at every entrance. If Al-Rashid was indeed inside that building, this would be their best opportunity to capture him. Falcon, Ghost. I have eyes on 2 rooftop sentries. Requesting permission to engage. Sarah quickly scanned the compound and confirmed Ghost targets. Bravo 1. Falcon confirms 2 sentries on the main building roof. No other elevated threats visible. Ghost, Bravo 1. You are cleared to engage. Execute on my mark. The next few seconds seemed to stretch into eternity. Sarah watched through her scope as Ghost's precisely placed shots eliminated both rooftop sentries so quietly that their comrades below didn't immediately realize what had happened. The approach to the main building was now clear for the assault team. Falcon, tank. Initiating diversion in 30 seconds. Sarah shifted her attention to the western side of the compound where Tank had positioned himself with a selection of explosive devices. The diversion would need to be dramatic enough to draw the guards' attention without causing casualties among any innocent personnel who might be in the compound. The explosion, when it came, lit up the night sky like a miniature sunrise. Tank had detonated charges in the motor pool, destroying several vehicles and creating a spectacular fireball that sent compound personnel running in all directions. Sarah watched as guards abandoned their posts to respond to the apparent attack from the west. Bravo 1 Falcon. Diversion is effective. Most personnel are moving toward the motor pool. Your approach route is clear. Rodriguez and the remaining team members moved swiftly toward the main building while the compound's defenders were distracted. Sarah tracked their progress through her scope, noting their precise movement and professional execution. Within minutes, they had reached the building and begun their infiltration. Falcon, Bravo 1. We're inside the main building. Searching for the target now. Sarah maintained her surveillance of the compound while the team conducted their search inside the building. The guards were still focused on the burning vehicles in the motor pool, but she knew it wouldn't be long before they realized the fire was a diversion and began searching for the real threat. Bravo 1 Falcon. You need to move faster. The guards are starting to organize search teams. I estimate 5 minutes before they begin sweeping the main building. Copy that, Falcon. We're moving as fast as we can. The next few minutes were agonizing. Sarah could only watch and wait as the assault team searched the building while compound security gradually realized they were under attack. She tracked multiple groups of armed men as they began systematic searches of each building, working their way toward the team's location. Falcon, Bravo 1. Target acquired. We have Al-Rashid in custody and are moving to extraction point Alpha. Sarah felt a surge of relief and adrenaline as she heard Rodriguez's confirmation. They had found their target and were beginning their withdrawal. But her relief was short-lived as she observed armed men moving to intercept the team's planned extraction route. Bravo 1 Falcon. Your primary extraction route is compromised. I count at least 10 armed personnel blocking the eastern approach. Recommend alternate route through the northern section of the compound. Negative, Falcon. Northern route takes us too close to the motor pool and the main body of defenders. We'll have to fight our way through the eastern approach. Sarah watched in growing concern as the two groups moved toward an inevitable confrontation. The team had accomplished their primary mission, but they still needed to escape the compound with their prisoner. The odds were not in their favor. 6 operators against at least 30 defenders on unfamiliar ground. Bravo 1. I can provide fire support from my position. The range is extreme, but I might be able to suppress the eastern blocking force. Sarah had never fired her weapon in combat, but her training scores were excellent, and the situation was becoming desperate. She quickly calculated range and wind conditions while adjusting her rifle's scope for the long-distance shot. Negative, Falcon. Maintain your position and continue providing intelligence updates. We'll handle the ground situation. The firefight began as the team attempted to break through the eastern defensive line. Sarah watched helplessly as muzzle flashes erupted throughout that section of the compound. She could hear the distinctive sound of American weapons mixed with the heavier reports of AK-47 rifles. But, from her distance, it was impossible to determine who was winning. Falcon, document. We need immediate extraction at the secondary site. Rookie is hit, and we have multiple wounded among the defenders. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. Sarah immediately contacted their helicopter support while continuing to monitor the tactical situation. The extraction helicopters were standing by at a forward base approximately 20 minutes away, but 20 minutes might be too long if the team was pinned down by superior numbers. Bravo 1, extraction birds are inbound. ETA, 20 minutes to secondary extraction point. Can you reach that location? Affirmative, but we're going to need cover during our movement. The compound defenders are organizing a pursuit. Sarah made a decision that would define her role on the team forever. Despite Rodriguez's orders to maintain her position, she began moving down from the observation post toward a location where she could provide effective fire support during the team's withdrawal. The range would still be challenging, but it was their best hope of reaching the extraction point safely. Bravo 1. Falcon is moving to provide fire support. I'll be in position to cover your movement in approximately 10 minutes. Falcon, I ordered you to maintain your position. Master Chief, with respect, you need covering fire, and I'm the only one available to provide it. I'm moving to support my team. The descent from the observation post was treacherous in the darkness, but Sarah's training sustained her as she picked her way down the mountainside, carrying her full combat load. Every few minutes, she paused to monitor the team's situation and confirm their location, adjusting her planned position to maximize her effectiveness. When she finally reached her firing position, Sarah could see the team moving through the valley below while being pursued by a much larger force of defenders. The distance was still considerable, nearly 800 meters, but it was within her capabilities if she could remain calm and apply her training properly. Bravo 1. Falcon is in position and ready to provide covering fire. Send me target priorities. Falcon, we have a vehicle-mounted heavy weapon approximately 600 meters behind us. That's our primary threat. Sarah located the vehicle through her scope and began her firing sequence. The first shot was a tracer round that allowed her to confirm her point of impact and adjust for any errors. The second shot struck the vehicle's windshield, and subsequent shots forced the crew to abandon their weapon and seek cover. For the next 15 minutes, Sarah provided continuous fire support as the team fought their way toward the extraction point. Her long-range precision shooting disrupted multiple attempts by compound defenders to establish blocking positions, and her accurate fire kept the pursuing force at a distance that prevented them from overwhelming the team. Falcon, Bravo 1. We're at the extraction point, and the birds are inbound. Outstanding shooting, you saved our lives tonight. Sarah continued providing overwatch until she heard the distinctive sound of approaching helicopters. The extraction went smoothly, with the team and their prisoner loaded aboard the first aircraft, while Sarah was picked up by the second. As they lifted off into the night sky, she could see fires still burning in the compound below and vehicles racing through the valley in confused pursuit patterns. During the flight back to their forward base, Doc treated Rookie's leg wound while the rest of the team conducted their initial debriefing. Al-Rashid was secured and under guard, his capture representing a significant victory in the ongoing fight against international terrorism. But Sarah's thoughts were focused on her teammates and the realization that she had fired her weapon in combat for the first time. "Hell of a thing, Falcon," Ghost said as he cleaned his rifle. "Most analysts would have stayed nice and safe on that hilltop. You came down to fight with us when we needed you." Rodriguez approached her as they neared their destination. "You disobeyed a direct order tonight, Lieutenant." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Yes, Master Chief, I did. The tactical situation required it, and I made the call to support my team." Rodriguez studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Good call. That's exactly what I would have done in your position. Welcome to the team, Falcon. You've earned your place here tonight." As the helicopter settled onto the landing pad at their forward base, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed during the mission. She was no longer just an intelligence analyst working with the SEAL team. She was a full member of that team, someone who had proven herself under fire and earned the respect of some of the military's most elite operators. The nickname Falcon had taken on new meaning, representing not just her analytical skills, but her courage under pressure and willingness to risk everything for her teammates. The mission had been a complete success, but more importantly, Sarah had discovered capabilities within herself that she hadn't known existed. She was looking forward to whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in her abilities and secure in her place among these extraordinary men who had become her brothers in arms. The forward operating base in eastern Afghanistan buzzed with activity as news of al-Rashid's capture spread through the intelligence community. Sarah sat in the debriefing room, watching as senior officers from multiple agencies arrived to interview their high-value prisoner. The successful mission had generated interest from the highest levels of government, and everyone wanted to understand how they had managed to capture one of the world's most elusive terrorist leaders. 3 days had passed since their return from the compound, and the team had been in continuous debriefing sessions with various intelligence specialists. Sarah's role as the mission's intelligence analyst had placed her at the center of these discussions, as officials tried to understand how her real-time analysis had contributed to the operation's success. "Lieutenant Shun," said Colonel Patricia Hayes, the senior intelligence officer who had arrived from Kabul that morning, "your performance during this operation has been exceptional. The intelligence community is very interested in developing similar capabilities for future operations." Sarah nodded respectfully, while inwardly feeling uncomfortable with the attention. "Thank you, ma'am. The success belongs to the entire team. I was just doing my job." Colonel Hayes smiled knowingly. "Your teammates have been very clear about your contributions, Lieutenant. Master Chief Rodriguez's report specifically mentions your willingness to abandon a secure position to provide fire support during their extraction. That kind of tactical flexibility and personal courage is exactly what we need in this type of operation." The meeting continued for another hour, covering technical aspects of intelligence gathering, recommendations for future missions, and Sarah's assessment of al-Rashid's network based on documents recovered during the raid. When it concluded, Sarah felt drained from the constant scrutiny and eager to return to normal operational routines. She found the rest of Bravo team in their temporary quarters, engaged in the familiar ritual of equipment maintenance. Despite the successful mission, these men never allowed themselves to become complacent about their gear or training. Ghost was cleaning his rifle with the methodical precision of a master craftsman, while Tank inventoried his explosives and Doc updated his medical supplies. "How did the debrief go, Falcon?" Rodriguez asked as she entered the room. "More of the same, Master Chief. Lots of questions about intelligence procedures and integration with special operations teams. They're apparently considering establishing permanent intelligence specialist positions with SEAL teams." Rookie looked up from the radio equipment he was testing. "You mean they want to put more analysts in the field with us?" "That's what it sounds like," Sarah replied, settling into an empty chair. "Though I suspect finding analysts willing to jump out of airplanes and shoot their way out of terrorist compounds might be challenging." The team laughed, and Sarah realized how much had changed since her first day at Coronado. The nervous tension and need to prove herself had been replaced by the comfortable camaraderie of people who had shared danger and emerged stronger for it. These men had accepted her as one of their own, and she had earned that acceptance through performance under pressure. "Speaking of future operations," Rodriguez said, we've received preliminary warning for another mission. Nothing definite yet, but it looks like al-Rashid's capture has provided intelligence on a major terrorist summit scheduled to take place in the next few weeks. Sarah's interest sharpened immediately. During the interrogation sessions with al-Rashid, investigators had recovered information suggesting that multiple terrorist leaders were planning to meet at a location somewhere in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region. If accurate, this intelligence could provide an opportunity to eliminate several high-value targets in a single operation. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Ghost asked. 2 weeks, maybe less, Rodriguez replied. The intelligence is still being analyzed, but early indications suggest this could be the most significant terrorist gathering in years. If we can locate the meeting site and mount a successful operation, it could disrupt multiple networks simultaneously. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied the prospect of a new mission. The successful capture of al-Rashid had proven that she could operate effectively in the field, and she was eager to apply those lessons to an even more challenging operation. Over the next few days, intelligence began flowing in from multiple sources about the planned terrorist summit. Sarah found herself at the center of an analytical effort involving dozens of specialists from various agencies, all working to piece together fragments of intercepted communications, human intelligence reports, and pattern analysis to locate the meeting site. The work was painstaking and often frustrating. Terrorist leaders had learned to be extremely cautious about their communications, using code words, intermediaries, and encryption to mask their intentions. Each piece of intelligence had to be carefully evaluated for accuracy and cross-referenced with other sources to build a coherent picture of terrorist plans. Sarah's experience from the al-Rashid mission proved invaluable during this analytical phase. Her understanding of how terrorists operated in the field, combined with her technical expertise in intelligence analysis, allowed her to identify patterns and connections that other analysts might have missed. She worked 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination while slowly assembling the intelligence puzzle. "I think I've found something," Sarah announced during one of the daily intelligence briefings. She stood before a wall-mounted map of the border region, pointing to a remote valley system approximately 50 kilometers from their current location. "This area has been mentioned in 3 separate intercepted communications over the past week," she continued. "The references are oblique, but the pattern suggests significant activity planned for this location within the next 10 days. Colonel Hayes studied the map carefully. "What makes you think this is the summit location rather than just another training camp or supply depot?" Sarah had anticipated this question and had prepared a detailed analysis. "Several factors, ma'am. First, the communications references suggest the presence of multiple senior leaders, not just local commanders. Second, the logistics requirements mentioned in the intercepts indicate a much larger gathering than would be typical for routine operations. Finally, this location offers natural advantages for a high-security meeting, multiple escape routes, defensive positions, and isolation from potential surveillance." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "What kind of intelligence do we have on the site itself?" "Limited, but encouraging," Sarah replied, activating a laptop computer connected to the briefing room's projection system. Satellite imagery filled the screen, showing a compound nestled in a valley between steep mountain ridges. The facility appears to have been constructed specifically for high-security meetings. Multiple buildings, sophisticated defensive positions, and what appears to be a communications center. The room fell silent as the assembled officers studied the imagery and considered the implications. If Sarah's analysis was correct, they had identified the location of a terrorist summit that could include some of the most wanted men on the planet. The opportunity was unprecedented, but so were the risks. "What kind of force would we need to successfully assault this location?" Colonel Hayes asked. Rodriguez had clearly been thinking about the tactical challenges. "It would require a significantly larger force than our previous operation. The defensive advantages are substantial, and we'd be facing potentially dozens of well-armed terrorists in prepared positions. A full company of Rangers supported by air assets would be the minimum requirement." Sarah listened to the tactical discussion while continuing to analyze the intelligence data. Something about the pattern of communications was bothering her, but she couldn't quite identify what was setting off her analytical instincts. The intelligence seemed almost too convenient, as if the terrorists wanted their communications to be intercepted. "Colonel," Sarah said during a break in the tactical planning, "I'd like to request additional time to verify this intelligence before we commit forces to an assault." Hayes looked surprised. "You just presented a compelling case for this being the summit location. What's changed?" Sarah struggled to articulate her concerns. "It's nothing specific, ma'am. Just a feeling that something isn't quite right about how easily this intelligence came together. In my experience, terrorist leaders are more careful about operational security than what we're seeing here." Rodriguez studied her carefully. "What exactly are you suggesting, Falcon?" "I'm suggesting we conduct additional surveillance of the site before committing to a major operation. If this is indeed the summit location, we'll see increased activity and security preparations. If it's not, we'll avoid walking into a potential trap." The room erupted in discussion as various officers debated the merits of Sarah's suggestion. Some argued that the intelligence was solid and that any delay risked missing the opportunity entirely. Others supported her caution, pointing out that rushing into operations based on incomplete intelligence had resulted in disasters in the past. Colonel Hayes finally restored order. "Lieutenant Chun, you have 48 hours to conduct additional analysis and surveillance. If you can't confirm the intelligence by then, we proceed with the operation as planned." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. If she was wrong about her suspicions, she could be denying the military its best chance to strike a devastating blow against international terrorism. If she was right, her caution could prevent a catastrophic ambush that might cost dozens of lives. She threw herself into the analysis with renewed intensity, examining every piece of intelligence from multiple perspectives and searching for any inconsistencies or anomalies that might indicate deception. The work was mentally exhausting, but Sarah's training had prepared her to function under pressure and maintain analytical objectivity despite the stakes involved. On the second day of her extended analysis, Sarah made a discovery that validated her concerns. While reviewing the metadata from intercepted communications, she noticed that several of the key messages had originated from locations that should have been outside the normal operational areas of the terrorist groups involved. "Master Chief," she called to Rodriguez, who was reviewing tactical plans at a nearby desk. "I need you to look at something." Rodriguez joined her at the computer terminal where she had displayed a map showing the geographic origins of various intercepted communications. "What am I looking at, Falcon?" "These are the transmission points for the communications that led us to identify the summit location," Sarah explained. "Notice anything unusual about the pattern?" Rodriguez studied the map for several minutes before his expression changed to one of concern. "These transmission points form a pattern that's designed to lead us to that valley. It's too neat, too convenient." Sarah nodded grimly. "That's exactly what I was thinking. This isn't intelligence we've intercepted, it's intelligence we've been fed. Someone wants us to attack that location, which means it's almost certainly a trap." The implications of this discovery were staggering. If Sarah's analysis was correct, the terrorists had managed to feed false intelligence to the American military in an attempt to lure a significant force into an ambush. The sophistication required for such an operation suggested involvement by highly trained intelligence operatives, possibly with state sponsorship. Rodriguez immediately contacted Colonel Hayes and requested an emergency briefing. Within an hour, the senior intelligence staff had assembled to hear Sarah's findings. The room was tense as she presented her analysis, explaining how the pattern of communications suggested deliberate deception rather than genuine operational planning. "Are you certain about this assessment?" Colonel Hayes asked when Sarah had finished her presentation. "As certain as I can be without additional verification, ma'am. The pattern is too clean and too convenient to be the result of normal terrorist communications. Someone has gone to considerable effort to create the appearance of authentic intelligence while actually feeding us false information." The room fell silent as the officers contemplated the implications. A trap of this sophistication suggested that the terrorists had detailed knowledge of American intelligence gathering methods and procedures. Such knowledge could only come from extensive training or inside information. "What do you recommend?" Hayes asked. Sarah had been thinking about this question since discovering the deception. "We turn the trap against them, ma'am. If they want us to attack that location, we give them what they expect, but not in the way they're planning." She moved to the map and began outlining her proposal. We proceed with apparent preparations for a major assault on the Valley compound, making sure our preparations are visible to terrorist surveillance. Meanwhile, we conduct covert reconnaissance to determine where the real ambush force is positioned. Once we locate their actual positions, we can mount a surprise attack against their ambush while they're waiting for us to walk into their trap. Rodriguez smiled for the first time in days. That's brilliant, Falcon. We use their deception against them. The plan required careful coordination and precise timing. For the next week, the base made obvious preparations for a major assault on the Valley compound. Equipment was moved, additional forces were brought in, and reconnaissance flights were conducted over the target area. To any observer, it would appear that the Americans had taken the bait and were preparing to attack exactly where the terrorists expected. Meanwhile, Sarah worked with a small team of specialists to identify the true terrorist positions. Using sophisticated electronic surveillance equipment and careful analysis of the few genuine communications they could identify, she slowly began to piece together the actual terrorist plan. The picture that emerged was sobering. The terrorists had positioned a significant force in the mountains overlooking the Valley compound, with heavy weapons and prepared positions that would allow them to devastate any force that entered the valley. It was a sophisticated ambush that would have resulted in massive casualties if the Americans had proceeded with the original plan. How many fighters are we looking at? Rodriguez asked as Sarah briefed the team on her findings. At least 60, possibly more, she replied. They have mortars, heavy machine guns, and what appears to be anti-aircraft weapons. If we had gone in as originally planned, it would have been a massacre. Ghost let out a low whistle. Somebody really doesn't like us. The question now, Sarah continued, is how we turn this situation to our advantage. We know where they are, and they think we're going to walk into their trap. That gives us the element of surprise. The plan they developed was complex, but elegant. Bravo team would conduct covert surveillance of the terrorist positions while a larger force appeared to prepare for the obvious assault. Once the terrorist ambush force was confirmed to be in position, a coordinated attack would strike their positions from multiple directions while they were focused on the empty valley below. Sarah's role in the operation would be crucial. She would coordinate intelligence from multiple sources while providing real-time tactical analysis to the assault forces. Her experience from the Al-Rashid mission had demonstrated her ability to function under pressure and make critical decisions in fluid tactical situations. The operation began at dawn on a clear mountain morning. Sarah established her command post on a ridge overlooking the terrorist positions, surrounded by communication equipment that kept her connected to every element of the assault force. Through her binoculars, she could see the terrorist fighters in their concealed positions, waiting patiently for American forces to enter their kill zone. All units, Falcon. Enemy positions confirmed. Count approximately 70 fighters in prepared positions along the eastern ridge. Heavy weapons include at least 3 mortar positions and multiple machine gun nests. The assault began with precision airstrikes on the terrorist heavy weapons positions, followed immediately by ground forces moving to assault the ridge from 3 directions. Sarah coordinated the attack while tracking the movement of both friendly and enemy forces, providing constant updates and tactical recommendations to the assault commanders. The battle was fierce but brief. Caught completely by surprise and attacked from unexpected directions, the terrorist ambush force was quickly overwhelmed. Within 2 hours, the ridge was secured and the threat eliminated. More importantly, documents and equipment recovered from the terrorist positions provided valuable intelligence about the broader deception operation and its organizers. During the post-operation debriefing, Colonel Hayes addressed the assembled officers with obvious satisfaction. This operation represents a significant victory, not just tactically but strategically. We have eliminated a major terrorist force and demonstrated that our intelligence capabilities can identify and counter sophisticated deception operations. She turned to Sarah with an expression of respect. Lieutenant Chun, your analytical work quite literally saved dozens of American lives. Your ability to identify the deception and develop a counter-strategy demonstrates exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need in this conflict. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she listened to the colonel's praise, but her thoughts were already turning to the next challenge. The successful operation had undoubtedly impressed her superiors, but it had also revealed the sophistication of their enemies. The terrorists were learning and adapting, developing new methods to counter American advantages in technology and firepower. "What's next for the team?" Rodriguez asked during their private debriefing. "Additional missions, certainly," Hayes replied. "Your team's unique capabilities have attracted attention at the highest levels. I expect you'll be seeing more complex operations that require the kind of integrated intelligence and tactical capabilities you've demonstrated." As the briefing concluded and the team prepared to return to their quarters, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her arrival at Coronado. She had evolved from an untested analyst into a proven operator, someone who could think clearly under pressure and make decisions that affected the lives of others. The nickname Falcon had taken on new dimensions of meaning, not just her analytical skills, but her ability to see patterns others missed and strike precisely when the moment was right. The war against terrorism would continue, and Sarah knew that her role in that war was just beginning. Each mission had taught her new lessons and revealed new capabilities within herself. She was no longer just an intelligence analyst who happened to work with a SEAL team. She was an integral part of that team, a warrior whose weapon was her mind and whose battlefield was the complex world of modern conflict. As she cleaned her equipment and prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah felt a deep sense of purpose and belonging. She had found her place in the world, fighting alongside the best soldiers America had to offer in defense of freedom and justice. Whatever the future held, she was ready to meet it as Falcon, the woman who had earned her wings through courage, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to her teammates and her country. 6 months had passed since the successful counter-ambush operation in the mountains of Afghanistan. Sarah stood on the deck of the USS Theodore Roosevelt, watching the sun rise over the Mediterranean Sea as the massive aircraft carrier cut through calm waters toward their next deployment zone. The transition from mountain warfare to maritime operations represented another evolution in her unconventional military career, but she had learned to embrace change as a constant in the world of special operations. Bravo team had been reassigned to a joint task force focused on disrupting terrorist activities across North Africa and the Middle East. Their success in Afghanistan had earned them recognition at the highest levels of the special operations community, and their unique capabilities were now being applied to an entirely different theater of operations. "Falcon, you need to see this," Rodriguez called from inside the ship's intelligence center. Sarah made her way through the maze of corridors that filled the carrier's interior, past busy sailors and Marines preparing for their upcoming missions. The Intelligence Center was a high-tech nerve center filled with computer terminals, satellite communication equipment, and large display screens showing real-time intelligence from around the globe. Rodriguez stood before one of the screens, studying satellite imagery that showed a coastal compound in what appeared to be Libya. "What am I looking at, Master Chief?" Sarah asked as she joined him. "Our next target," Rodriguez replied grimly. "Intelligence suggests this facility is being used as a coordination center for terrorist attacks across the Mediterranean region. The problem is its location. It's in the middle of a heavily populated civilian area." Sarah studied the imagery carefully, noting the compound's position relative to residential neighborhoods, schools, and commercial areas. The target building was clearly identifiable, but any assault would risk significant civilian casualties unless executed with extraordinary precision. "What kind of intelligence do we have on the facility itself?" she asked. "Limited, but concerning," Rodriguez replied, pulling up additional files on his computer terminal. "Human intelligence sources report that the facility is being used to plan maritime terrorist attacks, possibly including attempts to target commercial shipping or cruise vessels in the Mediterranean." Sarah felt the familiar surge of analytical focus as she began processing the information. Maritime terrorism represented a significant threat to both military and civilian targets, and the confined waters of the Mediterranean provided numerous opportunities for devastating attacks. If the intelligence was accurate, disrupting this facility could prevent attacks that might kill hundreds of innocent people. "What's the operational timeline?" she asked. 72 hours, Rodriguez replied. "Intelligence suggests that a major planning meeting is scheduled to take place at the facility, similar to the situation we encountered in Afghanistan. The difference is that this time we're dealing with an urban environment with significant civilian presence. Sarah spent the next several hours reviewing all available intelligence on the target, including architectural plans, surveillance photos, and communications intercepts. The facility appeared to be a converted warehouse located in a mixed-use district of Benghazi, surrounded by apartment buildings, shops, and other civilian infrastructure. The tactical challenges were substantial. Traditional assault methods would be impossible due to the civilian presence, and the urban environment limited options for surveillance and approach routes. The team would need to develop an entirely new operational concept that could achieve their objectives while minimizing risks to innocent bystanders. "We need to think differently about this one," Sarah told the team during their initial planning session. "Everything that worked for us in the mountains of Afghanistan will be useless in an urban environment surrounded by civilians." Ghost nodded thoughtfully. "The precision requirements are going to be extreme. We can't use explosives, we can't rely on supporting fires, and we can't afford any collateral damage whatsoever." Doc raised another concern. "Medical support will be limited. If anyone gets wounded, we'll be dealing with hostile territory and no friendly forces nearby for extraction." Tank, surprisingly, offered a different perspective. "Maybe we don't need to assault the facility at all. If the goal is to disrupt their planning meeting, there might be other ways to accomplish that objective." Sarah looked up from the intelligence files she was studying. "What are you thinking?" "Intelligence gathering," Tank replied. "Instead of attacking the facility, we infiltrate it during the planning meeting and gather intelligence on their operations. If we can identify their targets and methods, we can disrupt their attacks without risking civilian casualties in an urban assault." The idea was audacious but appealing. Rather than destroying the terrorist facility, they would penetrate it covertly and gather enough intelligence to prevent the attacks the terrorists were planning. It would require different skills and equipment than their previous operations, but it offered the possibility of achieving their objectives without the risks associated with urban warfare. Rodriguez considered the proposal carefully. "It's definitely possible, but the risks are different rather than reduced. If we're discovered inside the facility, we'll be trapped in hostile territory with no backup and no easy extraction routes." Sarah had been thinking about the technical aspects of such an operation. "We'd need extensive surveillance and preparation. I'd have to identify the facility's security procedures, personnel patterns, and the exact timing of the planning meeting. One mistake, and the entire team could be captured or killed." Over the next 24 hours, the team developed a detailed plan for what they designated Operation Silent Watch. Sarah would conduct extensive surveillance of the target facility while the team prepared specialized equipment for covert infiltration. The goal was to place surveillance devices inside the building during the terrorist planning meeting and gather intelligence that could be used to prevent their planned attacks. The operation required equipment and skills that differed significantly from their previous missions. Instead of combat gear and heavy weapons, they would carry electronic surveillance devices, lock-picking tools, and communications equipment designed for covert operations. Each team member would need to blend into the urban environment while conducting activities that would appear suspicious to any observer. Sarah's role expanded beyond intelligence analysis to include operational planning and reconnaissance. She would need to establish detailed surveillance of the target facility, identify security vulnerabilities, and develop contingency plans for every phase of the operation. The analytical skills that had made her valuable in previous missions now became the foundation for tactical planning. The carrier arrived off the Libyan coast under cover of darkness, and the team prepared for insertion using methods completely different from their previous operations. Instead of halo jumps and helicopter insertions, they would travel to shore using small boats and then blend into the civilian population of Benghazi. "Remember," Rodriguez emphasized during their final briefing, "we're not soldiers tonight. We're tourists, business people, journalists, anything except American military personnel. The moment we're identified as operators, the mission fails, and we're probably dead." Sarah had never operated undercover in a hostile urban environment, and the psychological adjustment was challenging. Instead of tactical gear and weapons, she wore civilian clothes that would allow her to blend into the local population. Her equipment was concealed in a backpack that appeared to contain tourist supplies, and Her primary weapon was a concealed pistol rather than an assault rifle. The boat ride to shore took 2 hours through choppy Mediterranean waters. Sarah used the time to review her cover story and practice the Arabic phrases she might need during the operation. Her fluency in the language was limited, but she had learned enough to handle basic interactions without revealing her American identity. Landing on the Libyan coast at night was surreal after months of military operations. Instead of heavily defended compounds and mountainous terrain, they found themselves walking through urban neighborhoods where normal civilian life continued despite the ongoing political turmoil. Sarah had to constantly remind herself to behave like a tourist rather than an operator conducting reconnaissance. The team dispersed according to plan, with each member taking a different route to avoid detection. Sarah's assignment was to establish surveillance of the target facility and identify the optimal approach routes for the infiltration team. She made her way through the city streets, using her cover as a freelance journalist to explain her presence and equipment. The target facility was exactly as described in the intelligence reports, a converted warehouse surrounded by civilian buildings and normal commercial activity. Sarah established her surveillance position in a cafe across the street, ordering tea and positioning herself where she could observe the building's entrances and security procedures. Over the next several hours, she documented the facility's routine operations, noting the arrival and departure of various individuals and identifying patterns that could be exploited during the infiltration. The security appeared to be minimal during daylight hours, but Sarah knew that would change dramatically when the terrorist leaders arrived for their planning meeting. Falcon, Ghost. I'm in position for Overwatch. The building has excellent sight lines from multiple directions, but civilian presence is heavy throughout the area. Sarah acknowledged Ghost's report while continuing her own surveillance. The team was positioning themselves around the target facility, but they had to be extremely careful to avoid detection by either the terrorists or local law enforcement. Any suspicious activity could compromise the entire operation. As evening approached, Sarah observed increased activity around the target building. Several vehicles arrived carrying men who appeared to be security personnel, and she noticed the installation of additional security measures at the building's entrances. The terrorist planning meeting was clearly scheduled to begin soon. All units, Falcon. Target facility is showing increased security activity. I count at least 6 additional personnel, and they're implementing enhanced security protocols. We need to execute soon or lose our window of opportunity. Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece. Copy, Falcon. All units move to final positions. We execute in 30 minutes. Sarah gathered her equipment and moved to the predetermined insertion point, an alley adjacent to the target building that provided concealed access to a ground floor window. The team had identified this route during their planning, but executing it in darkness while surrounded by hostile personnel would test everyone's skills and nerve. The infiltration itself was a masterpiece of silent teamwork. Rodriguez and Tank disabled the building's alarm system while Ghost maintained overwatch from a nearby rooftop. Sarah and Doc entered through the ground floor window while Sage and Rookie established communications and prepared extraction routes. Inside the building, Sarah found herself in a maze of corridors and rooms that had been converted for use as offices and meeting spaces. The intelligence reports had been accurate about the building's layout, but navigating in darkness while avoiding detection by security personnel required extreme caution and precise movement. Falcon, document. I'm placing surveillance devices in the main conference room. The meeting appears to be starting soon. I can hear multiple voices and movement above us. Sarah acknowledged Doc's report while continuing to move through the building toward her assigned objectives. Her mission was to access any computer systems and download intelligence files that might reveal the terrorists' operational plans. The information gathering had to be completed quickly and quietly before the security personnel realized they had been infiltrated. Finding the computer systems proved easier than expected. The terrorists had established a basic network in what appeared to be a former office space, complete with desktop computers and file servers that contained their operational planning documents. Sarah connected her portable storage device and began downloading files while monitoring for any signs of discovery. The intelligence haul exceeded their expectations. The computer files contained detailed plans for maritime attacks throughout the Mediterranean, including specific targets, timing, and methods of attack. Sarah realized they had discovered intelligence that could prevent multiple terrorist attacks and save hundreds of lives. All units, Falcon. I've accessed the primary computer systems, and I'm downloading operational files. This intelligence could prevent major attacks across the region. Rodriguez's response was immediate. Copy, Falcon. How much longer do you need? Sarah checked her download progress while listening for any signs of security activity in the corridors around her. 5 more minutes to complete the download. Then, I'll need 3 minutes to ensure we've covered our tracks. The next few minutes felt like hours as Sarah monitored the file transfer while simultaneously listening to the terrorist meeting taking place above them. Through her earpiece, she could hear Doc providing real-time intelligence on the discussion, which confirmed the authenticity of the computer files she was downloading. Falcon, Ghost. I'm observing increased vehicle activity outside the building. Looks like additional security arriving. You need to expedite extraction. Sarah's download was at 90% completion when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside the computer room. Someone was conducting a security sweep, and they were moving systematically through each room on her floor. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they reached her location. All units, Falcon. Security sweep in progress on my floor. Download is almost complete, but I may need to abandon position. Rodriguez's voice carried the tension they were all feeling. Negative, Falcon. That intelligence is too valuable. Complete the download, and we'll create a diversion to draw security away from your location. Sarah watched the progress bar creep toward completion while the footsteps grew closer. At 98%, the footsteps stopped directly outside her door. She could hear voices discussing whether to check the computer room, and she realized that discovery was imminent. The download completed just as the door handle began to turn. Sarah disconnected her equipment and moved silently toward the room's secondary exit, a window that led to a fire escape on the building's rear wall. As the security personnel entered the computer room, she was already climbing through the window into the Mediterranean night. Falcon, clear of the building. She whispered into her microphone while descending the fire escape. Download complete and intelligence secured. The team's extraction was as precisely coordinated as their infiltration had been. They dispersed through the city using predetermined routes, eventually reuniting at a safe house several kilometers from the target facility. By dawn, they were aboard a fast patrol boat heading back to the aircraft carrier, having successfully completed one of the most challenging intelligence-gathering operations of their careers. The intelligence Sarah had downloaded proved to be even more valuable than they had hoped. The terrorist files contained detailed operational plans for coordinated attacks on cruise ships, commercial ports, and naval facilities throughout the Mediterranean. The information included specific dates, targets, and methods of attack that would have resulted in massive casualties if the operations had proceeded as planned. This is extraordinary work, Colonel Hayes said during their debriefing aboard the carrier. The intelligence you've gathered will allow us to prevent multiple terrorist attacks and potentially save thousands of lives. More importantly, it demonstrates that covert intelligence gathering can be more effective than direct assault in certain situations. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction as she listened to the briefing on how their intelligence would be used. Naval and civilian security forces throughout the region were already implementing protective measures based on the information they had provided. Ports were increasing security, cruise lines were modifying their routes, and naval patrols were being repositioned to intercept the planned attacks. What made this operation successful, Rodriguez observed during the team's private debrief, was our willingness to adapt our methods to the tactical situation. Instead of trying to force a traditional assault approach, we developed new capabilities that matched the operational requirements. Ghost nodded in agreement. Falcon's analytical work was crucial, but so was everyone's ability to operate outside their normal comfort zones. We function more like intelligence operatives than traditional operators, and it worked. Sarah realized that Ghost had identified something important about their evolution as a team. They were no longer just a SEAL team with an attached intelligence analyst. They had become something entirely new, a hybrid unit that could adapt its methods to meet any operational requirement. The nickname Falcon had taken on yet another dimension of meaning, representing not just her individual capabilities, but the team's ability to soar above conventional limitations. Over the following weeks, the success of Operation Silent Watch generated significant interest within the special operations community. Sarah found herself briefing senior officers and intelligence specialists on the techniques they had developed for urban covert operations. The integration of traditional special operations skills with advanced intelligence gathering capabilities was seen as a model for future operations in an increasingly complex global security environment. "You've essentially created a new operational concept," explained Brigadier General David Morrison, the commanding general of Joint Special Operations Command, during a video conference from his headquarters. "The ability to conduct precision intelligence gathering in denied urban environments fills a critical gap in our capabilities." Sarah appreciated the recognition, but she was more interested in the practical applications of their success. "The key insight, sir, is that different operational environments require different approaches. Traditional assault methods work well in remote areas, but urban operations require more subtle techniques." General Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly why we're establishing a new program based on your team's innovations. We want to develop additional units with similar capabilities and deploy them to other theaters where traditional methods have proven insufficient." The conversation continued for another hour, covering technical aspects of their operations and recommendations for expanding the program. When it concluded, Sarah found herself facing a career decision that she hadn't anticipated. The success of their operations had created opportunities for advancement and recognition, but it would also mean leaving the team that had become her military family. "They're offering me a promotion and assignment to establish the new program," she told Rodriguez that evening as they stood on the carrier's flight deck watching aircraft operations. "I would be responsible for training new analysts and developing operational procedures for other teams." Rodriguez was quiet for several minutes before responding. "That's a significant opportunity, Falcon. You'd be able to share everything you've learned with a new generation of operators and analysts." "But it would mean leaving the team," Sarah replied. "After everything we've been through together, the thought of starting over with different people is difficult." Rodriguez smiled in the darkness. "You know what I learned during my 20 years in the teams? The mission is bigger than any individual, even those we care about most. If you can help create 10 teams like this one, you'll have a much greater impact than staying with us for more operations." Sarah knew he was right, but the emotional attachment to her teammates was stronger than she had expected. These men had become more than colleagues. They were brothers who had shared danger, trusted each other with their lives, and grown together through shared experiences that few people could understand. "Besides," Doc added, joining their conversation, "it's not like you'll disappear forever. The special operations community is smaller than you think, and our paths will cross again." Over the next few days, Sarah wrestled with the decision while the team prepared for their next assignment. The opportunity to establish a new program was appealing from a professional perspective, but leaving the team felt like abandoning a family. She found herself studying each team member and trying to memorize the details of their interactions, afraid that once she left, the bonds they had forged would gradually weaken. The decision was made for her when they received intelligence about a time-sensitive operation that would require immediate deployment. A terrorist cell in Syria was reportedly planning an attack on a refugee camp that housed thousands of displaced civilians. The intelligence was solid, the threat was imminent, and Bravo Team was the only unit positioned to respond quickly enough to prevent the attack. "We deploy in 6 hours," Rodriguez announced during their emergency briefing. "This will be a traditional assault mission. The terrorists are located in a remote compound away from civilian areas, and we have authorization for whatever level of force is necessary to stop the attack." Sarah realized that this would likely be her final operation with the team, and she was determined to make it count. She threw herself into the mission planning with renewed intensity, analyzing every aspect of the intelligence and developing contingency plans for multiple scenarios. If this was to be her last mission as Falcon, she wanted it to be flawless. The operation launched at sunset from the carrier's flight deck, with the team aboard 2 helicopters that would insert them near the terrorist compound. As Sarah watched the Mediterranean coastline disappear behind them, She felt the familiar surge of pre-mission adrenaline combined with a deeper emotion that she couldn't quite identify. "You're thinking too much, Falcon," Ghost observed over the helicopter's intercom system. "This is just another mission. We go in, we complete the objective, and we come home." Sarah smiled at Ghost's attempt to provide reassurance, but she knew this mission was different. It represented the culmination of her transformation from an untested analyst into a proven operator, and it would determine how she remembered her time with these extraordinary men. The insertion went smoothly, with both helicopters delivering the team to their planned landing zone without detection. The target compound was located in a valley similar to their first operation together, but the tactical situation was completely different. Intelligence indicated that the terrorists were preparing to depart for their attack on the refugee camp, which meant the team had to move quickly to prevent them from escaping. "Falcon, what's your assessment of the compound?" Rodriguez asked as they moved into their surveillance positions. Sarah studied the target through her binoculars, comparing the actual layout with their intelligence reports. "Everything matches our planning, Master Chief. I count approximately 15 personnel visible, with vehicles prepared for departure. Based on their activity level, I estimate they'll be moving within the next 2 hours." The assault plan was straightforward but required precise timing. Ghost would eliminate sentries with precision shots while the rest of the team approached from multiple directions. Sarah would provide overwatch and coordinate the assault while monitoring for any attempt by the terrorists to escape with their weapons and explosives. "All units, this is Bravo 1. Execute on my mark." The assault began with Ghost's precisely placed shots eliminating the compound's perimeter guards. The team moved swiftly through their assigned approach routes while Sarah tracked their progress and monitored for any signs of terrorist counteraction. The coordination was flawless, representing months of training and shared experience operating together. Within minutes, the compound was secured and the terrorist threat eliminated. More importantly, they had prevented an attack that could have killed hundreds of innocent refugees. As Sarah watched her teammates secure the area and gather intelligence materials, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and closure. "Outstanding work, everyone," Rodriguez announced as they prepared for extraction. This operation prevented a humanitarian disaster and demonstrated exactly why this team is considered among the best in the world. During the helicopter flight back to the carrier, Sarah made her final decision about her career. She would accept the promotion and assignment to establish the new program, but she would carry the lessons and memories of her time with Bravo team into her new role. The bonds forged through shared danger and mutual trust would endure regardless of organizational changes or geographic separation. "I'm going to miss this," she told Rodriguez as they watched the sunrise over the Mediterranean. "We all will," he replied. "But you've proven that anything is possible when people are willing to adapt, learn, and trust each other completely. That lesson will serve you well in whatever challenges lie ahead." As the carrier came into view on the horizon, Sarah reflected on her extraordinary journey from a Pentagon analyst to an integral member of one of the world's most elite military units. The nickname Falcon had evolved from a simple call sign into a symbol of her transformation and growth, representing her ability to see clearly, strike precisely, and soar above conventional limitations. She was no longer the uncertain lieutenant who had arrived at Coronado months earlier, wondering if she could keep up with the SEAL team. She had become Falcon, a warrior whose weapons were intelligence and courage, whose battlefield was wherever freedom needed defending, and whose legacy would live on in the new generation of operators and analysts she would train and inspire. The mission was complete, but Sarah's war was just beginning. There would be new challenges, different enemies, and unfamiliar battlefields ahead. But she faced them with confidence, knowing that she had earned her place among America's finest warriors and that the lessons learned alongside Bravo team would guide her through whatever lay ahead. As the helicopter touched down on the carrier's deck, Sarah felt the satisfaction that comes from a mission accomplished and a duty fulfilled. She was ready for her next assignment, carrying with her the knowledge that somewhere in the world, 6 extraordinary men would continue the fight, knowing that they had helped forge a warrior who would multiply their impact far beyond anything they could achieve alone. The woman they had nicknamed Falcon was ready to spread her wings and soar into a future filled with new possibilities and challenges, secure in the knowledge that she had found her true calling in the service of something greater than herself.